SY0063. It has tens of years of history. We all know that coal is the driving fuel for the locomotive. Even though we're not using steam locomotive anymore, but for locomotive fans, they still think highly of the steam locomotive because it can remind us of the history and also to experience the culture and feature of the age of steam. Now we are having the 11th Steam Locomotive Tourism Festival in Qieling. Now we see 21 steam locomotives here, very precious, and actually all of these locomotives can be operated right now. So we can go back to the age of steam and experience the feeling of driving the locomotives. We have a special guest here, Mr. Yan Shi, a working staff from the Tiemei Steam Locomotive Museum. He is closely related to the steam locomotive. Actually, he spent half of his life in dealing with locomotives. So Mr. Yan used to be the driver for the locomotive for 12 years. Start from 2002, less locomotive are used. But now he's in the industry of tourism for the steam locomotives. Now we see a lot of tourists in the museum. They are coming here to understand the civilization of the age of steam and the steam locomotive. So we would like Mr. Yan to take us to go through the age of steam. We all know that Watt invented locomotive. First, we have the steam engine, and later we invented the steam locomotive. So here we show some photos on locomotive from other countries in the past. The power is not as strong as the motor locomotive that we used. The engine and the steam can only support one carriage. But at that time, it's actually a breakthrough of the age. So after several years of renovation and evolution, now we have the modern steam locomotive. So can we say that the steam locomotive is like the earliest train? Yes, we could say that. Now we see the rapid development of the high-speed train, but at that time, steam locomotive contribute a lot for the given age. There is a map here. So this should be a picture, like a festival photo for Qing Dynasty. At that time, we don't have train, but some people travel overseas, so they draw this picture with their impression of the train. So it can show at that time people have the aspiration for the train, the modern train, because they never seen a real one. That's why they draw a picture to show their aspiration. There is carriage and big wheels, and also you can see the steam. Even though the ratio maybe is not correct, it's like a cartoon. It's just an impression from people at that time. They deliver the message to us, but it's not a complete message for the train. In the past, people have very good aspiration for the train. So hoping that in the future they can go travel with a steam locomotive. And we understand that the steam locomotive is much convenient than a horse carriage. At that time, they don't have modern vehicles like cars, and they don't have trains. At that time, they only use horse carriages. That's why steam locomotive are very significant at that time. Mr. Yan just said that at that time we don't have steam locomotive. So when we have the first one, in 1865, that is the first time we saw the steam locomotive in China. There is a merchant blender. They came to China and brought up the idea of the steam locomotive. And they built a 0.5 kilometer rail in the Xuanwumen. And then the purpose is to promote the idea of the steam locomotive. But at that time, the local government did not accept the locomotive. They think the locomotive is like a monster. It's big and looks very odd. They were not willing to accept the new things. And in the 30s of the 20th century, there is a saying that China becomes the world's exhibition of the steam locomotive. At that time, China don't have the capability to produce the steam locomotive. That's why people are saying that, well, you can see all kinds of steam locomotive from other countries in China, but it's quite ironic because they think China don't have the capability to produce their own steam locomotive. For Chinese people, even though they are called, you are the country with all kinds of steam locomotive, but now we can see China is quite different. So we have the high-speed train and all of those advanced technologies. But when we have the first steam locomotive, so the first locomotive we built was in 1952. The first one, we call it JF type, trunk line service freight steam locomotive. It was designed and made by steam locomotive. Well, it is not designed by us. But we can see that in 1956, we finally designed the first locomotive of our own. We call it HP type. We call that HP locomotive. We design it, we build it our own. And later, we have different types. For example, JS type and FD type. All of these are very well-known brand for the domestic steam locomotive. Here I found that in 2005, all of the locomotive were no longer used in China. When they said it, they meant for national railways, we are not using the steam locomotives anymore. But some of the goods can only be transported through steam locomotives. For example, the steel. But gradually, steam locomotives were no longer used. We just see a brief introduction and the development history of the steam locomotive. And we also understand the contribution that was made by the steam locomotive. And later, we understand that less and less steam locomotives are used. It's a change of time and shows the development of the age. How many years have you drive the steam locomotive? 12 years. I took different roles in locomotive. At the beginning, I worked for the stoker, meaning that adding coals into the boiler. So at that time, I'm not a driver. I started to work for the locomotive from 1993 as an apprentice for the stoker. Here we see the like a car plate, a vehicle plate. What is it? Well, it is a train plate for the locomotive. The middle one, 上游, we call it the SY type. Chairman Mao saying that at that time we should use all of our efforts to build China. So that's the meaning of the character 上游 SY. And also we have the series number. For example, 0979, meaning that this one is the 979 locomotive that we produced. Just like the ID number. We saw so many plates here. Do we have the locomotives for these plates? Yes, most of them we have it. For example, the KD6 487, we have the locomotive. We kept this one. For this middle one, why we have a very small number for 6? The 6 is also a series number. For the others, we see the Chinese character, but for this one, it said a KD. What does that mean? So this one is actually made from the United States. But why we have the locomotive from the United States? This is after World War II, and the United States gave this locomotive to China to support its construction and the development. So it has a lot of historic significance. Can we see the locomotive of this one? Yes, later we can see it. We will check this later to understand the stories behind it. Maybe later you can give more detailed information about this locomotive. Next one, we also have another kind of plate which shows the factory which produce this steam locomotive, including dates of production. For example, this one is the 8th year of Zhao Ge. And also this one is produced in Dalian after the invasion of Japanese army. You have been a driver for many years, and at the beginning, you were used to be an apprentice for the stoker. So we know that we are using coal to drive the locomotive. So does that mean in the locomotive there is a boiler? Yes. First, we use the boiler to generate some steam, and then through heat exchange, and the steam will enter into the cylinder in order to pull the train and pull the engine. Now we can see a few parts of the locomotive. For a locomotive, in general, it has over 3,000 parts. Some of them are quite big in size, so we are not demonstrating them. For this big one, what is that? It is the cover of the stoker. So you have a pedal when you step on that, and then the cover will open. So this is the cover for the boiler. The cover is to prevent the cool air entering into the boiler. And next one is a single valve.
So this is for the slow down the speed and then for stop. So this is for slowing down. So or think about like a car, then that's the brake for the car. And another one, this one, for the whole locomotive, this one to stop the whole locomotive. This is for the whole train. So like the small one is only for the height of the train, and this big one is for the whole locomotive. So it's a really, really high technique required for driving a locomotive, right? It's easy to make it move, but it's really hard to manage a whole technique. And this is for the air whistle. There are 2 whistles on the locomotive. And this is also basically to say hello to other locomotive. And this one, they always make big sound, is the steam whistle. So we have the air whistle and steam whistle. And this can produce a very loud sound. And what about this one? This is actually to change the car is for the accelerator. So this is like we control by the hand. So you want to speed up, you can change this one. So this is basically to change the level of steam. There are a lot of different secrets. So this is the min valves. So when you put up the valves, then they give you the highest level of steam, so help you to reach the fastest speed. And this is a generator. So this helps to generate power for the locomotive. This is only used for the locomotive. So that's between the range of 45 to 55. And this is for the water gauge. And this is, should I put it in the vertical direction so we see where the water is. So we can measure the water level. So it can show you the water in the boiler. So there are so many techniques required. So I know Mr. Yan, you started as a stoker and later on become the chief driver. With your rich experience in the industry for 12 years, I believe you really knew a lot of techniques for driving the locomotive, especially the steam one. So later on, I worked more as a manager, so I know. So actually, before we took 4 shifts, so I managed the whole 4 shifts So from the very beginning, I start to become a fireman or a stoker, later on to be the manager. That's really depend on my experience. So you started from a green hand, and you know more and more gradually become an experienced practitioner. So actually, for my generation, we only saw this in movies or films or on TV. So we didn't really have the experience to really write on it. So here's the photos that display here. You can see the different generation of the locomotives. So this part is actually, you can see that's coal, and for the top part, that's for the fuel. So that's a fuel and water tender. So that's basically the engine for moving the locomotive moving forward. So the boiler is all inside. So the driver is where you sit. I sit here. And for the top part, for the front part, that's the whole boiler. So that's all the boiler here? Yes. So here is for the smoke part, steam part, and the boiler is here. So that's to produce the steam. So we rely on fuel and water to produce steam. So also, besides the driver, we also have a driver that help us to look at the wheels in front of us and also look for any potential risks on the route. So every year, why this exhibition happened in the winter, or why you can see a lot of pictures actually took in the winter, because for the wheel, it's really easy to see the steam produced by the locomotive in the winter. So that is why we always would like to take a lot of pictures in the winter for the steam locomotives. So the vapor is very visible in the winter. So we have a driver. We also have like the stokers for the. So basically, it's not only depend on one driver. So to really drive the locomotive, actually depend on a team. Besides the driver, we also have stoker. We also have other people to do the assisting jobs. So right now it's negative minus 30 degrees Celsius. It's really, really freezing here in Tieling. So right now we are on our way to the exhibition hall. So in the exhibition hall, you will see 21 locomotives. They are really, really precious assets. And right now, for all these 21 locomotives, actually, can put into service now. And this is actually, here we have the most largest scale of locomotives. And we also have the KD487 as with a very historic story behind. And we also here you can find the last 3 locomotives that produced in China. We will show you all these locomotives later on in the exhibition hall. Right now we are on the way to the exhibition hall, and I hope we can have the opportunity to really get on the train to back to the old days. Actually, the history of locomotive development really took a long time. Is there any interesting stories you can share with us, Mr. Yan? At the very beginning, when the steam locomotive emerged, people not really welcome or appreciate, because people really back then got used to like horse, cart, or like people like that really worked in the horse carts industry. They really refuse the locomotives because they believe that locomotive should really have had a slow speed, so they would like to have a competition between the steam-hauled locomotive and the horse-pulled carts. So actually, the competition really happened. And because of the technical issues, actually, the locomotive in the end, they stopped in the middle way. So the people saying, like, see, the new thing didn't work. So we should still follow and use the horse-pulled carts. But then people found, like, the speed of the locomotive actually was very fast and actually can carry a lot of luggage. That's why, in the end, the steam locomotives replaced the horse carts. So I believe if we want to talk about the first steam locomotive, then that should be in Great Britain. And actually that the person, I believe, is George. So George actually saw the steam engine invented by Watt in the exhibition, and it's really a good inspiration for him. Then later on he invented the steam locomotives. And of course we should have the rail track first, otherwise there is no track for the locomotives. For the very beginning, actually, the coal mine workers, actually, they invented the rails, the rail track. So because they need to carry the coal out of the coal mine to other places. So like to facilitate their work or to make their days easier, they invented and actually established the tracks. So later on, we built the locomotives based on the tracks. And here we go, you can see. We have see here are one locomotive and I believe it's standby. I think that's right. They have a boiler that's working now. I think so, yes. Actually, it's in the operating mode. And a vapor, that's the steam, right? Yes. And actually, this is the waste smoke. So this brings us back to the old days. This is also the scene we usually see in the film. This is Shangyou 1772. That's the train number or the locomotive number. This is also a very meaningful one. This is the last locomotive in the series of Shangyou category. So here we go. This is the exhibition hall. And here in this hall, you can find 21 locomotives. And this is only available here at the International Locomotive Tourist Festival. And all these 21 locomotives, actually, they all in a very good condition, and they are actually operationable. And let's go inside to check more. To find out more stories, let's get inside. So here actually displayed the 21 locomotives. So we have this exhibition hall for all these 21 trains. And you can see the first one, that's the KD487. I believe here is 18 inside. We have another 3 outside. So this one, this is the first one on the at the entrance. This is KT487. We had a very historic stories behind the locomotive, and it's a really valuable one. So let's just hear the story. So this locomotive KD487, that's happened after World War II. So United Nations actually support China to establish the development, and so they vault around 50 locomotives. So this is one of it, and this is from United States. And this actually back then played a very great role in establishing the industry. And why this locomotive is displayed here? Back to 2004. We found this one. Actually, this one already retired. So we used one of our Shangyu locomotive to replace this one. Actually, when we found this one, this was in a really poor condition. No one really understand the value or the story behind of this KD487, as we use a very good condition Shangyu locomotive to replace this one. And we actually, after we got this KD487, we totally, let's say, wash the car to make it look nice in a good condition, because this is really valuable one. This train actually has been to many different cities, and this is a very key players to help China to establish its development mechanism.
So this locomotive has went to different places, mining places, made a lot of contribution to the country. But because of the development of the age, now this one was obsolete. But now we have it back and wash it, dismantle it, and renovate this one. So this one can be used again. Here we have a tourism project for the locomotive, and also some of the films are produced with this locomotive. For example, one of the film called the Grand Master. So one of the locomotive was used in the film. So people get to see this kind of locomotive again. So many famous films are produced with all of this locomotive. I also watched 1942, and also we have this locomotive in the film. I want to touch it, so it's a well-known locomotive, like a star locomotive. Yes, we call that a star. Are there any special features for this star locomotive? Let's check out the wheel. The wheel is different than the other wheels. It's very light and can be used for many years. Does it have a generator? No, it doesn't have a generator, because we use the boiler to run the locomotive. We just change small parts of this locomotive and keep the major ones. I want to enter this locomotive because it's very famous, the KD6487. Even though the name is difficult to remember, but it did make a lot of contribution to China. Even though we are not use it for commercial purposes, but still we can use it in other industry. For the other one, Yuejing 269, also a large size, right? No, actually, in this exhibition hall, this one is relatively small compared to others. This one is used for district transfer. We have 202 of this. I want to go inside and take a look. So this is the boiler, right? Yes, with the pedal. Okay, so here is the boiler. Well, just wait a moment. We can see clearly in another locomotive. I also want to ask another question. We have 21 locomotives here. So how many of them have you actually get in and drive those locomotives? Most of them I used to drive. So for the mining districts, in the past, we used almost every locomotive here, right? Yes, at that time we used 20 or 21 locomotives. Yes, we used it for transportation to transport the coals. So do you have a very memorable one? Any personal emotions attached to any of these locomotives? Well, many. So we can see that Mr. Yan getting a little bit of emotional. He has been a driver for 12 years for the steam locomotives. And after 12 years of driving, and then suddenly steam locomotives were no longer used. How do you feel? Well, actually, I attach great emotions to the locomotive. I have emotions for them. Well, for this one, you can see characters like for modernization engraved in this locomotive. Yes, that one is in the 80s. But it is not the latest version of the locomotive. At that time, we call it the youth generation of the steam locomotive. You can see that the youth generation. So youth also represents the future, like the backbone, the talents. So people who work for this locomotive are very diligent and have spent a lot of efforts in doing their job. And we can see a lot of information about this vehicle. At that time, the speed is 80 kilometers per hour, and the loading of the water is 25 tons. So for this kind of a steam locomotive, water and coal are extremely important for the locomotive. With the evaporation, you have to keep adding water into the boiler in order to produce energy and power to run the locomotive. So this one was made in 1982. And also we see the badge of the league. It's quite typical at that time. So you will feel very proud if you are in the steam locomotive like that. So how many times you have been working in this locomotive? That depends on the amount of the freight. So it's not fixed working hours for me. It is this one which carry the coal and travel around China. So first, you use the locomotive to carry the coal, and then the coal will be unloaded and put it into another transportation vehicle and send it to other places. I remember that. I think that Mr. Yan must have a lot of emotions for this locomotive. Maybe it reminds you of the past. Because of the development of the age, so these locomotives are no longer used. So it become like a souvenir for China. So in the future, I think less and less locomotive will be used in China. And I know that now we don't use a lot of locomotive in the transportation. Except for the locomotives put it inside the hall, we also have 3 locomotives outside of the hall. It is the Shangyou type of the locomotive. In China, we stopped producing locomotives in 1995. So what is the reason? Is it because it is not as good as the diesel locomotive or electric locomotive? Well, I think for the steam locomotive, it requires a lot of manpower. If you use the diesel locomotive and the electric locomotive, it can save manpower and protect the environment. For steam locomotive, it releases a lot of waste smoke, so it's not environmental friendly. And here we see the last 3 Shangyou type steam locomotive. Some of them produced in 1995 and 1999. So this will be the last 3. Actually, this one is the last one produced in China. This is the last one that China produced. After producing this one, the steam locomotive are gradually out of sight in China. And in this tourist festival, we see all of these different kinds of locomotives, and each of them carried their own stories. Can we get on board to take a look at this locomotive? Well, actually, I can feel the age of steam right now. Can we get in from here? Yes. So today we are very lucky to share this moment with our viewers to take a close look at the steam locomotive. It's quite different than I expected. Just take a look. Look at the seats. All of these are wooden seats. So the body of the locomotive is made in 1935. So this one we use for tourism. It's a different kind of feeling when you board on this kind of train. So for this steam locomotive museum, some of the films are produced here, because this kind of locomotive can give you a sense of history. We have a lot of films here. For example, the Grand Master and many well-known films are produced on this locomotive. I want to sit here and experience it, even though the wood is very hard, but you can experience the age of the steam. Some of the tourists, they love this kind of feeling in such a old-fashioned locomotive. I want to try to sit here with very good sunshine. Very nice view also. When you sit here, you can think of the old days. You can also think of your future when you sit here. I thought it is refurbished. No, it is the original design, the wooden window. It's a double layer of the window. It's rarely seen nowadays. All of these are coming from the past. So for this one, is it a freight locomotive? Well, this train is for commute for the people who work for the locomotives.
And you can see here is more modern style. I believe this is for the cafeteria. So here actually coming to the end of the festival. And we believe during the festival they're fully occupied by the tourists. So you can see we have very old style and also some very modern style carriages. And the car actually used for different movie shootings. So they come to you to see what kind of the film or what kind of a locomotive style they would like to have, so we provide them accordingly. Because some film they prefer the wooden seats, or some of the films they would like to more the locomotive that for carrying the carrying the luggage. So we have a different kinds of the styles of locomotives available here. So let's also go to the steam locomotive boiler. Let's look at more the engine for the locomotive. I believe this is some 1930s style, and this one is another cartoon as we basically travel through the times from the very old days to more modern days. So this is for another cafeteria. Let's go to the head of the locomotives. The temperature here, I believe, should be warmer, right? We use air condition nowadays. This is for the meeting room. I believe this is total another different style, another scene. It's a little bit different from what we are thinking about. This is more the updated, or this is the modern style. This is for karaoke. So you can sing a song and then enjoy the party here. And going ahead, that's for the power generation area. And when the locomotive starts to run, I believe later this locomotive will start to move. So we experience different styles in different days. We'll have an old fashioned, we'll have some very new fashion style, different styles, different feeling. You all can experience here at the festival or at the exhibition hall. I would like to see more about the head of the locomotive to see exactly to find out more the details and the secrets about the like boilers or the engines of steam locomotives. I believe today is the last day of the festival, so we didn't see a lot of tourists here. I believe this locomotive will depart any time soon. Hope we can have an opportunity to find the details of the head of the locomotives. I believe the snow you are seeing now, I believe that's accumulated a few days ago, as the snow actually was going on for 3 to 4 days. It's departure now. I believe it's moving. So this is Shangyou 1772. We didn't have the opportunity to find the secrets at the head of the locomotive. So originally, or for the film, is from Shenyang province to Qiqihar province, or to the Qiqihar city. So here is more for the tourist purpose. And you can see the locomotive is heading to the destination. So the speed here is not really fast, but that brings the very great views along the route. So this is actually a very popular filming or TV shooting place. So we have different styles of locomotives available here. Each locomotive actually have their own features. So it's a pity we didn't have the opportunity to really show you the details or give you a closer look of the head of the locomotives. But it doesn't matter, because next year we'll also be here to bring you more, give you more coverage of the festival. So Mr. Yan, would you please share with us your experience on the locomotive, how that feels like? Actually, the view is really good, especially in the winter, because a lot of places are covered by the snow. So it's really beautiful and memorable scenes along the route. That is also one of the key reasons. A shooting team is come here. And let's go ahead to another locomotive. Hope we can give you a closer look of the head of the train. So we didn't have the opportunity to show you exactly how it feels like on the train when the train is moving. But I hope if you have opportunities, please come here next year to experience by yourself, because the festival is held every year. And let's go to another locomotive to find out the secrets of the engine, the steam engine. And you can see from a very long distance, you can tell the vapor. Vapor is very easy to see. It's very visible in the winter. And Mr. Yan right now show us the way to another locomotive. And the scene you are seeing now is in a very old fashion, and you can see the vapor. That's the very iconic feature of steam locomotive. I believe this is 1772. That's the last locomotive built in China. For this year's festival actually attracted many tourists from China and around the world. For the exhibition hall, we have 21 locomotives. All of them in a very good condition that all can put into service. So this is a very small station, but this is actually a very popular scene that in different movies. I believe this is also you can call it a star in the locomotives industry. A lot of different film shooting teams actually come here. And this is Shangyou 1772. Let's get on and go to find out more inside. I believe this is a boiler. So this is the boiler for the locomotive, and this is the door of the boiler. You can see it's on work. It's operating now, and we have a different index to show whether the boiler and the whole train is operating in a good condition. And actually, this is the driver. This is the driving seat. And in the boiler, you can see we're burning the coal. So we have a different, that's some the machines or the equipment that's operated automatically, and some actually should operate it by hand. And this is something we control the speed and the steam in the boiler. And we can change the speed. So this is a very unique experience for you, right? Because there are not a lot of drivers now. They have that experience in driving a steam locomotives. Actually, before I came here, I thought there should be a separate room for drivers. But here you can see the driver just sit next to the boiler. And the sound you heard is from the steam whistles. And I believe that's also the call to start the locomotive, and we are moving gradually forward. And actually the locomotives start to run very fast, and the high speed is around 50 miles or the 50 kilometers. I believe the experience right now is very good. And we can see more and more vapor are producing. And I'll show you, actually this is my first experience riding on a steam locomotive. So this is the boiler. You can see inside, that's the coal. So that's the boiler inside. That's the fuel that produce the engine, produce the power to move the locomotive to moving forward. And although right now we all traveled on the high-speed trains, but it's really a great experience. And I would really like to invite all our viewers here to have a visit and also to try by yourself. We have 21 locomotives here available, and I hope you enjoy it, because right now we're back to the steam age. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.